the American Consumer Confidence Index, it's one of the key indicators that economists use to take the temperature of the American consumer and therefore the US economy. This is the last 5 years, and you can see this here, that the American consumer sentiment is dropping sharply. It's nearly as low as when the pandemic took hold in 2020. That data is gathered by the business and research group, the Conference Board of America. It has more than 1,000 companies as members, and I've been chatting with its big boss. Steve Odland, a real pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for your time. And Steve, look, let's just get straight into it, because your numbers are showing consumer confidence slipping almost as dramatically as when lockdown started. So what's your take on the way consumers are feeling now?
So, Aaron, thanks for having me. You know, the Conference Board's Consumer Confidence Index has been declining now for 3 consecutive months. And there are 2 components to the index. The consumers talk about their current situation, how are they feeling about inflation and their jobs right now, and then how are they feeling about the future. And a few months ago, people started to be worried about the future. Now, in the most recent reading, they're concerned about the present. What's driving it is inflation. Inflation is at record levels. You know, we haven't seen these kind of rates in over 40 years, and people are seeing that eat into their household income and what they're able to spend. Predominantly food and fuel. Gas prices here are outrageous, and Americans aren't used to that. So you see consumer confidence declining. The reason this is important is because consumer spending makes up about 70% of the US GDP. So it's a big deal when consumers are worried and when they're thinking about ratcheting back their spending.
But Steve, in the US, you've got a pretty firm job market. I mean, we've just seen the recent numbers. So how does that play into this picture?
Well, you know, it's a really interesting situation. Every recession, you know, post-World War II, has been with big job declines. And so you see the US Federal Reserve raising interest rates to try to diminish inflation and adjust. People are worried about that, by the way, because the Fed has never engineered a soft landing. And so it's really hard. It's not critical. It's not to be critical of them, but it's hard to do. And so people are saying, yeah, there's going to be a recession because it's impossible to engineer a soft landing. So you see that happening at the same time that the US jobs market is holding up, which is counterintuitive. You normally see jobs coming down in this kind of a setting. So, you know, it's a very strange situation, but it does give confidence to the Federal Reserve that they can be more aggressive because we are at full employment.
And of course, you mentioned inflation. We can't get away from it. These price rises, I mean, it's going to hurt consumer sentiment.
Well, see, this is the deal, because, you know, you see real income coming down, but it's food and it's fuel. Now, these are, you know, typically when inflation hits, you don't see as much in these 2 areas, but right now it's food and it's fuel. And that's over half of the inflation right there. These are the 2 issues that hit every household. And so the poorest households are the ones that are disproportionately affected through this. And that's another worry through it. So people are ratcheting back all of their plans related to big purchases, automobile purchases, appliance purchases, capital goods. But it is also rippling back then through businesses. And so our latest CEO confidence index has predicted a recession. And, you know, when the US CEOs get worried about recession, they start ratcheting back capital investment, hiring plans, and everything else. And this becomes a concern because they can actually create a recession by ratcheting back their spending. So all of this is coming through in sort of a circular fashion here to our projection that there will be a recession in the US by the end of 2022 and carried over into 2023.
But you've said that businesses are more, well, they're not worried about consumers, but more the Fed, America's central bank. What do you mean by that?
In the latest CEO confidence surveys, what we've seen is that CEOs are projecting a recession. And the reason is not because of the consumer, but because of the Fed. As the Fed raises interest rates, they then drive productivity down. They drive investment down and so forth. And so the Fed is worried about this 2% inflation, and they've been very forthcoming about that their target is 2%, and they would rather that the GDP actually takes a decline for a period of time, or that they hit the labor market negatively in order to get the inflation in place. So that's their priority. And so everything else is secondary. So CEOs are saying, therefore, it's not going to be a soft landing. It will, in fact, be a recession as a result. And now that I know that it's going to be a recession as a CEO, I must then, bulletproof my business against that, which means that I'm going to ratchet back capital spending and so forth, and I'm going to increase my liquidity. And that's what then helps to create this spin in a recession and actually can make it worse.
And I've been wondering, Steve, is it still true that when America sneezes, the world gets a cold?
Well, we sit here, so how do we know? But look, I think that the American economy is still, 25% of the global economy. China now is number 2. It's a huge portion. So it's impossible for the U.S. economy not to have a ripple effect, particularly with the interconnectedness of the global economy and the global supply chains, the trading that's going on with not only the developed world, but also the developing world. So we're all interconnected today. And so when the big economies have trouble or go into a decline, it does ripple over.
Steve Odland, a real pleasure having you on the show. Thanks for your time. We'll talk to you soon.
Great to be with you. Thank you.